Hi everyone, I'm Ali GREYMOND. Today I wanted to talk to you about how to correctly do an exposure when you're doing an on what I call an on-purpose exposure. There's two kinds of exposures generally. There's on-purpose exposures where you deliberately are putting yourself in the situation of exposure, and then there is what I call accidental exposures where exposures are just happening. So the first thing is you want to always be in the state where you are aware, you are focused on what you're doing, whether it's an exposure, just daily life stuff, but you are focused that, okay, I'm doing this, now I'm doing that. You're not in a frantic state where you have to do a million things. If you feel like you're always in that state, then you have to re-examine what you do throughout the day and see if you actually need to do that many things. What can you maybe delegate to somebody else? What maybe you just don't need to do and you're doing for no reason, it's useless kind of effort, right? So really see what it is that you need to do and cut down accordingly. So all day long, you are going from situation to situation, from task to task, but not feeling overwhelmed. Right now, as you are going through recovery, you cannot be overwhelmed because it will impact your recovery. I understand that sometimes it just happens, but this cannot be your constant state. So now, when you are doing on purpose exposure, you are centered, you're not overwhelmed, and before starting the exposure, you are running through it. You're like in your mind, you're running through it, saying, "Okay, this is gonna get bad. I am gonna get really strong thoughts, urges to do a compulsion or to think the thought through and figure something out. When this happens, and it will, I will refuse reaction." So you kind of from the beginning, right before kind of jumping in the water, you are making that pact with yourself that this is what I'm going to do when the thoughts get bad. Okay, so now so again, you're centered, you've talked yourself through what is going to happen, and when it happens, what you are going to do. Okay, so now you are going into exposure, kind of like a warrior going into battle. And I know this seems kind of like a you know flowery language, but this is how you should really feel. Okay, so you're going into battle, you do the exposure, and you stick to the plan. So your plan was to do the and really understand what this exposure means. So say, for example, if you have a compulsion where you're doing something multiple times, what is the exposure? Is the exposure that you're only going to do whatever you need to do once? Is it that you're not going to do it at all? Or is it that you might do it more than once, but not as many times as you would do it if you were just doing just reassurance, right? So are you cutting it down fully, or are you kind of just taking it a level down because that you can't do it fully, right? Either one is okay. You're making a step forward. Either one is okay, but you need to know ahead of time what exactly would be a win in the situation. So again, you're prepared. And then once you hit that target, then you leave the area. So you leave the room. You're like, okay, I'm not doing this anymore, right? I'm pulling myself out of the situation, right? This is more with physical exposures rather than mental exposures, but with mental ones it would be kind of similar in the sense that, okay, I'm gonna allow the thoughts to come in. Okay, bring on the thoughts, bring on all the thoughts, let's hear it, right? Thoughts come in, but before that, you talk to yourself through that. When the thoughts come in, I will disregard. So thoughts came in, you disregarded. And with the mental exposures, I do recommend doing an activity right after, a very active, a very active activity, so to speak, such as calling somebody. Not talking about OCD, but talking about something entirely different, where you're going to be the one talking. So you want to make sure that you have something to refocus your mind on after. So you did the exposure and now you're doing something else. So you're moving on to the next step, even though you feel uncertain, even though you feel uncomfortable, knowing that you've been uncomfortable a million times. And this is not the first OCD thought. This is not the last OCD thought. You're just doing the recovery work. And as you do it, obviously you get better. And this is just a step in the road. So the fact that you'll feel uncomfortable, this is what it is. It's recovery. So but having that plan ahead of time of what you're going to do after, I find that especially with mental compulsions, it's important. And with mental compulsions, with the reassurance and that kind of thing, I would say try to take smaller steps than you would take with physical compulsions, because generally I had more of a Puro, so I don't know if it just feels that way to me because I've had more of a Puro, but I do think that it is harder to stop rumination than it is to stop yourself just from simply doing anything physical, you know. But physical compulsions also include ruminations a lot of the time, right? So you have to really see what you can handle, and maybe you're not gonna face the full thought, you know. Maybe you're going to face only this area of the thought, but you're not going to allow yourself to go further, or maybe you're going to face the milder thought, right? So you have to figure out what plan works for you. This is what kind of we do in sessions, right? That you have to figure out what plan works for you and how you can be successful in response prevention, because everybody is successful in just doing the exposure, right? The entire OCD is a big giant exposure, right? It's the response prevention that either makes you well, the response prevention makes you better, the, you know, reacting with a lot of fear makes you worse, you know. So it's just that execution of the response prevention that's the most important, and that's what you need to have confidence in. Even if the step is smaller, if you have confidence that yes, for sure I can do that step, do it a few times, and then you might be able to say, okay, now I can do more, you know. So doing it that way, it's a little bit more of a safer, and, you know, so you don't fall into the thoughts, because the worst is when you do an OCD exposure on purpose and then push yourself into rumination because you've gone too far, you know, kind of thing. So just try to take it a little bit slower to what you can handle and not overwhelm yourself. And again, guys, I can't say this enough. Stay centered throughout the day and make sure that if you have a high stress lifestyle, which a lot of us do, that's fine. But that stress has to be evenly spaced out where you're not getting overwhelmed. You know, you're always kind of stressed, but you're stressed evenly, and handling that stress in not in a way of, oh my God, there's something else now I have to do. Oh my God, there's this, there's that, right? But just saying, okay, this is my life. This is what it's going to be for a long time to come. This is, you know, I need to be able to habituate to this fast-paced lifestyle, you know, and maybe increasing it over time so you're not, again, not being overwhelmed. You know, really examine what it is you're doing every single day. Big things, small little habits, you know, what can you do on just in minutia of the day to stop yourself from running too fast, you know. And it could be just little things, but, you know, I can tell you one thing that kind of helps, I find, is doing something as simple as food prep, that you're not cooking something every time. And this doesn't apply to everybody, but it applies to a few people, right? So quite a few people actually, that instead of cooking something fresh every day, right, you're prepared. Instead of getting behind on work or school work, you know, planning ahead so then you're not doing things last minute, you know. Again, creating a situation where you are as relaxed, as centered as you could possibly be. You know, they're small things, they're not really OCD related, but if you start to get overwhelmed and you feel like, oh, I have to do this, this, and this, you know, your mind sees that you're overwhelmed, and then it brings on OCD because it doesn't understand the thoughts, and it doesn't understand the difference between real life stress and OCD stress. It kind of, it views, if you have one, then I need to send you the other, you know. And that's why you can start to get OCD thoughts when you're overwhelmed. So it seems like silly advice, but it really does make a difference. So I do want you to really take that to heart. I hope you find my videos helpful. Thank you so much for watching. If you haven't subscribed, please subscribe. I do daily videos on all things related to OCD recovery. If you would like to do the recovery program with me, all the information is on youhaveocd.com. Thank you so much for watching. I'll see you tomorrow.